I would love to. I have my drag king name. Nix and I picked our drag king name, so all I need is the drag to go with it, I guess.
Adam that you met.
Definitely do pirate.
Somebody rustling
Can you mute, please?
Yeah, thank you.
They've muted.
So what's your drag name, Frankie?
Evelyn Four. And Nix is
Oh.
in Lisp.
Brilliant.
Because we think we're very funny.
You are.
I think Nix is going to come along tomorrow night for the Sunday, the Standalone Sunday. So
Fantastic.
I get to introduce her to you.
Oh, fabulous.
Oh, wow.
That's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Crossing the streams.
Ah, where do you know them from?
What's that, my darling?
Where do you know them from?
Nix is one of the girls I went to school with.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. She's my platonic girlfriend.
Oh, that's lovely.
And yeah, she's the one who is interested in joining my quote-unquote dance cult.
Not a cult. Hashtag not a cult.
Happens.
So, Frankie, you saying everyone has to be on their best behaviour tomorrow?
Yes, seduce her in. One of us. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Oh, you love her. She's amazing. She's amazing.
Of course she's amazing. She's a friend of yours. Just the way it goes.
We could give her a virtual hug. We could all just kind of
greatness.
Yeah.
Virtual hugs all around. Right, let me see who we've got. Hi everybody. Oh my god, I love seeing like just the same faces kind of coming back night after night. It's like feels really good.
Lisa.
Lisa.
Lisa. Hi,
Malcolm.
Lisa.
Hi.
Hey, Lisa.
Hey, sweetie. Hi, Malcolm.
Hello.
Hello.
Is your facial hair growing again, Malcolm?
I'm bringing a moustache and a tiny soul patch in because, you know, why not? It's not quite there yet.
You look really RAF.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's what it
I'm getting that
Sandy
vibe.
and distinguished.
Yeah.
Story time.
Oh, could we wait like 2 minutes? Because Jonas is just making food.
Of course, sweetheart.
Otherwise, I'll just be hungry, or Jonas will miss the start.
Oh, both of those are bad. Both of those are bad. We will talk amongst ourselves until Jonas gets here.
Yay! I was meant to just subtly distract you for a couple of minutes, but I didn't manage to do it like that.
Is that why you're wearing the hat?
Yes. Hey, look at my hat, guys.
Just imagine
What's the story about the hat?
It's a great hat.
Thanks.
I'm going to have a
Oh,
prosecco
Lisa.
because it's Saturday.
What's that, my darling? What was that, Malcolm? I have to stop calling you all darling. I realised
Just stop
that.
saying
Please call us all darling, Frankie.
Yeah.
Malcolm, darling,
So,
what was that you just said?
Well, I said I'm going to have prosecco because it's Saturday.
Very sensible.
Would you like to
I
hear a
hope-
sad story?
Yes,
about
yes,
Prosecco?
yes.
Last night, my mum put a bottle of Prosecco in the freezer to cool down and forgot about it. Into my room this morning and said, be careful going into the freezer because I put a bottle of Prosecco in there to cool down and I forgot about it and it's exploded.
Bugger.
So we had to pick a certain amount of frozen like Prosecco slush and shards of glass out today.
If you do that better, you get a Prosecco lollipop.
What's that, love?
If you make a better job of that, you get a Prosecco lollipop.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like scooping all of this very Prosecco smelling kind of appetizing slush out of the drawer and thinking, just sieve it, right? I could just sieve the broken glass out and it would probably be fine.
Yeah.
No.
I didn't do it.
Internal bleeding is probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
quite fond of you.
Yeah, well, in general terms, and also now specifically, I think probably swallowing broken glass would not be my smartest.
Let's avoid unnecessary A&E trips.
Mm.
Preventable A&E trips.
It's very
taken the
circusy.
slush and melted it through a sieve
Mm.
so that the prosecco just was in the bowl underneath, and then refrozen it into lollipops.
I did do that once when I bought a bottle of gin from the supermarket and I forgot to get them to take the security tag off. So I got home and it still had the tag on. So I put it in a bowl and smashed it with a hammer and just sieved it. And it worked perfectly. It was fine.
Frankie.
So there you go. Top, like,
Seems easier than taking it back.
It was a very fine sieve. It was a very fine sieve.
Right. That's classy.
A damn fine sieve.
Lisa,
Hmm?
we cast you as Circus. I hope you don't mind.
And what now?
Oh yeah, we cast the Night Circus last night. How did you feel about being Tsukiko?
Oh, delighted.
How bendy are you?
Variable.
Bendy, are you?
Well.
Okay, listen. Let's all stop flirting with each other for a bit and listen to some story.
Is Jonas there yet?
Is Jonas here?
No.
Oh no! What's he doing? Keep
Distract us with your bendiness.
It was
since
our
I missed-
fault. We were talking with neighbours outside.
It's like
I lost track of time.
Since I missed the casting, have I been
Okay.
cast for anything?
Oh, I can't honestly, I can't remember who everyone was. All I remember is that Ben was Bailey, Zach was Chandresh, Mike was
We
Widget.
haven't got a female lead. If you would like to step up to that.
Oh my
Or
god,
if
yeah!
you would like to be one of
Actually,
the twins, you
no.
could be one of the twins as well.
We also actually need multiple Celias because she starts out age 5, and I'm sure that would test anybody's acting ability to go from 5 to.
That is
I can be
true.
a child. I can be a child.
Well, it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Oh, yay hat.
Yeah.
We need a young
I'm
mom.
kissing no 5-year-olds.
Right. Oh, we
Oh,
do.
God.
Do we have
People would make them
Do we have a young
Hey, Aaron.
Ara has eaten a lot of rice and it's given her an unprecedented amount of energy at bedtime. And she wants to see the people on the screen.
Hey.
Oh my god!
Hello. Hello. Hello, sweetie. Hi.
So cute.
Are we ready for Storytime, les enfants? Are we ready?
She's
for Storytime?
great.
Do we have everyone that we need to have?
Thank you so much for waiting.
Thank you for waiting.
No problem. Hi, Jonas. Hi, sweetness.
Hi.
Right.
Honestly, it was the perfect amount of time for me to get out of the bath and get myself sorted. So thank you, Jonas.
You're welcome.
Will be very carefully planned. Okay. It's story time.
Yes. Story time. Sorry.
And everybody mute.
Now, are you all sitting comfortably?
Yes.
Then I'll begin. Intersections 1, The Drop of a Hat. London, October 31st to November 1st, 1901. The circus is always particularly festive on All Hallows Eve. Round paper lanterns hang in the courtyard, the shadows dancing over their white surfaces like silently howling faces. Leather masks in white and black and silver with ribbon ties are set in baskets by the gates and around the circus for patrons to wear should they wish. It is sometimes difficult to discern performer from patron. It is an altogether different experience to wander through the circus anonymously, to blend in with the environment, becoming a part of the ambience. Many patrons enjoy the experience immensely, while others find it disconcerting and prefer to wear their own faces. Now the crowd has thinned considerably in these hours past midnight as the clock ticks its way into All Hallows proper. The remaining masked patrons wander like ghosts. The line for the fortune teller has dwindled down to nothing in these hours. Most people seek their fortunes early in the evening. The late of the night is suited for less cerebral pursuits. Earlier, the querents filed in almost non-stop, but as October fades into November, there is no one waiting in the vestibule. No one waiting behind the bearded curtain to hear what secrets the cards have to tell. And then the beaded curtain parts, though she heard no one approach. What Marco comes to tell her should not be a shock. The cards have been telling her as much for years, but she refused to listen, choosing to see only the other possibilities, the alternative paths to be taken. Hearing it from his own lips is another thing entirely. As soon as he speaks the words, a forgotten memory finds its way to the front of her mind. Two green-clad figures in the center of a vibrant ballroom, so undeniably in love that the entire room flushes with heat. She asks him to draw a single card. The fact that he consents surprises her. That the card he draws is La Papessa does not. When he leaves, Isabel removes her sign for the evening. She sometimes removes her sign early or for periods of time when she is tired from reading or in need of a respite. Often she spends this time with Tsukiko, but instead of seeking out the contortionist this particular evening, she sits alone at her table, shuffling her tarot deck compulsively. She flips one card face up, then another and another. There are only swords. Lines of them in pointed rows, 4, 9, 10, the single sharp ace. She pushes them back into a pile. She abandons the cards and turns to something else instead. She keeps the hat box under her table. It is the safest place she could think of, the easiest for her to access. Often she forgets it is even there, concealed beneath the cascading velvet. Always suspended between her and her querents, a constant unseen presence. Now she reaches beneath the table and draws it out from velvet shadows into the flickering candlelight. The hat box is plain and round, covered in black silk. It has no latch or hinge, its lid kept in place by 2 ribbons, one black and one white, that are tied in careful knots. Isabel places the box upon the table and brushes a thick layer of dust off the top, though much of it still sticks to the knotted ribbons. She hesitates and thinks for a moment that it would be better to leave it alone, to return it to its resting place. But it does not seem to matter any longer. She unties the ribbons slowly, working the knots out with her fingernails. When they are loosened enough for her to remove the lid, she pulls it off gingerly, as though she fears what she might find inside. Inside the box is a hat. It is just as she left it, an old black bowler hat showing some wear around the brim. It is tied with more black and white ribbons, wrapped like a present in light and dark bows. Beneath the knots of the ribbon, there is a single tarot card. Between the hat and the card, there is a folded white lace handkerchief, its edges embroidered with looping black vines. They were such simple things, knot and intent. She had laughed through her lessons, much preferring her cards. They seemed so straightforward in comparison, despite their myriad meanings. It was only a precaution. Precautions are wise in such unpredictable circumstances. No stranger than bringing along an umbrella for a walk on a day that feels like rain, even if the sun is shining brightly. Though she cannot be certain it is doing much more than gathering dust, not really. She has no way to be sure, no barometer on which to measure such insubstantial things. No thermometer for chaos. At the moment, it feels like she is pushing against an empty void. Isabel lifts the hat carefully from the box, the long ends of the ribbons spilling in a waterfall around it. It is oddly pretty for being an old hat and a handkerchief and a card tied up in fraying ribbon. Almost festive. The smallest charms can be the most effective, Isabel says, taken aback when her voice catches, almost on the brink of tears. The hat does not reply. I don't think you're having any effect at all, Isabel says. Again, the hat has no reply. She had only wanted to keep the circus balanced, to prevent two conflicting sides from causing damage to each other or their surroundings, to keep the scales from breaking. Over and over in her mind, she sees them together in the ballroom. She remembers snatches of an overheard argument, Marco saying he had done everything for her, a statement she had not understood at the time and forgotten soon after. But now it is clear. All the emotion in the cards when she would try to read about him, it was all for Celia. The circus itself, all for her. For every beautiful tent he creates, she builds one in return. And Isabel herself has been helping to keep it balanced, helping them both. She looks down at the hat in her hands. White lace caressing black wool, ribbons intertwined, inseparable. Isabel tears at the ribbons with her fingers, pulling at the bows in a sudden fury. The handkerchief floats down like a ghost, the initials CNB legible amongst the embroidered vines. The tarot card falls to the ground, landing face up. The image of an angel is emblazoned on it. The word tempérance is lettered beneath. Isabel stops, holding her breath, expecting some repercussion, some result from the action. But everything is quiet. The candles flicker around her. The beaded curtain hangs still and calm. She suddenly feels silly and stupid, alone in her tent with a pile of tangled ribbon and an old hat. She thinks herself a fool for believing she could have any impact on such things, that anything she ever did mattered at all. She reaches down to retrieve the fallen card, but her hand freezes just above it when she hears something. For a split second, it sounds like the squealing brakes of a train. It takes a moment for Isabel to realize that the noise coming from outside the tent is actually the sound of Poppet Murray screaming. Darkest Before the Dawn. Concord, Massachusetts, October 31st, 1902. Poppet and Widget stand by the circus gates, just out of the way of the ticket booth, though the line for tickets has waned in the late hour. The star-filled tunnel has already been removed, replaced by a single striped curtain. The Wunschtraum clock strikes 3 times behind them. Widget munches on a bag of chocolate-covered popcorn. What'd she say to him? He asks, with his mouth mostly full. I tried to explain as much as I could, Poppet says. I think I made an analogy about cake. Well, that must have worked, Widget says. Who doesn't like a good cake analogy? I'm not sure it made any sense. I think he was most upset that I asked him not to come tonight if he wasn't going to leave with us. I didn't know what else to say. I just tried to make sure he understood it was important. Puppet sighs, leaning against the iron fence. And I kissed him, she adds. I know, Widget says. Puppet glares at him, her face blushing almost as red as her hair. I didn't mean to, Widget says with a shrug. You're not hiding it well at all. You should practice more if you don't want me to see things. Didn't Celia teach you how to do that? Why is your sight getting better and mine's getting worse? Puppet asks. Look. Puppet rolls her eyes. Did you talk to Celia? She asks. I did. I told her you said Bailey was supposed to come with us. All she said was that she wouldn't do anything to prevent it. Well, that's something. She's distracted, Widget says, shaking his bag of popcorn. She won't tell me anything, and she barely listened to me when I tried to explain why we were asking. I could have told her we wanted to bring a flying hippopotamus along to keep as a pet, and she said it would have said that was fine. But Bailey's not coming just for fun, is he? I don't know, Puppet says. What do you know? Puppet looks up at the night sky. Dark clouds cover most of the stars, but pockets of them slide into view, twinkling softly. Remember when we were on the Stargazer and I saw something bright, but I couldn't tell what it was? Widget nods. It was the courtyard. The entire courtyard, not just the bonfire. Bright and burning and hot. Then, I don't know what happened, but Bailey was there. That much I'm sure of. Is this going to happen soon? Widget asks. Very soon, I think. Should we kidnap him? Really, Widge? No, really? We can do it. We can sneak into his house and hit him with something heavy and drag him back here as inconspicuously as possible. We can prop him up and people will think he's a town drunk. He'll be on the train before he's conscious and then he really won't have a choice. Quick and painless. Well, painless for us. Save for the heavy lifting, that is. I don't think that's really the best idea, Widge, Puppet says. Oh, come on, it'll be fun, Widget says. I don't think so. I think we already did whatever it was we were supposed to do, and now we have to wait. Are you sure about that? Widget asks. No, Puppet says quietly. After a while, Widget goes off in search of something else to eat, and Puppet waits by the gates alone, occasionally glancing over her shoulder to check the time on the clock behind her. Intersections 2. Scarlet Furies and Red Destinies. London, October 31st to November 1st, 1901. Though any night at the circus can rightfully be called magical, Herr Friedrich Thyssen once wrote, All Hallows Eve is something special. The air itself crackles with mystery. This particular Halloween night is cold and crisp. The boisterous crowd is clothed in heavy coats and scarves. Many of them wear masks, faces lost in swatches of black and silver and white. The light in the circus is dimmer than usual. The shadows seem to creep from every corner. Chandresh Christophe Lefebvre enters the circus without notice. He picks up a silver mask from a basket by the gates and slips it over his face. The woman in the ticket booth does not recognize him when he pays his admission in full. He wanders through the circus like a man in a dream. The man in the grey suit does not wear a mask. He walks leisurely with a calm, almost lazy gait. He has no particular destination in mind, wandering from tent to tent. Some he enters, others he passes by. He purchases a cup of tea and stays in the courtyard, watching the bonfire for a while before wandering back into the paths among the tents. He has never attended the circus before, and he appears to be enjoying himself. Chandresh follows him, every move, every stop, pursues him through tents and watches him pay for his tea in the courtyard. He stares at the ground near the man in the grey suit's feet, looking for his shadow, though he is thwarted by the ever-shifting light. Other than Chandresh, no one pays him any notice. Passers-by do not look at him, not even a glance is spared, despite his height and his pristine grey suit and top hat. Even the girl who sells him tea barely registers him, turning quickly to her next customer. He slides through the circus like a shadow. He carries a silver-tipped cane that he does not use. Chandresh loses him in the crowd more than once, the grey falling into a blur of black and white dotted with colour from the patrons. It never takes him long to spot the grey top hat again, but in the intervals between he becomes nervous to the point of shaking, fidgeting with his coat and the contents of his pockets. Chandresh mutters to himself. Those that pass by him close enough to hear look at him strangely and make an effort to avoid him. Following Chandresh is a young man he would not recognise even if he were to look him in the eye, but still the man keeps his distance. Chandresh's attention remains only on the man in the grey suit, and it does not once wander to this other man who bears a passing resemblance to his assistant. Marco keeps a steady grey-green eye on Chandresh, wearing no mask on a face only Celia would recognise, and the illusionist is otherwise occupied. This goes on for quite some time. Mr. A.H. tours the circus leisurely. He visits the fortune teller, who does not recognise him, but lays his future out in polite rows of cards, though she admits that bits of it are overlapping and confusing. He watches the illusionist perform. She acknowledges his presence with a single subtle nod. He tours the hall of mirrors, countless figures in matching grey suits and top hats accompanying him. He rides the carousel. He appears particularly fond of the ice garden. Chandresh follows him from tent to tent, waiting outside the ones he does not enter, drenched in ever-increasing anxiety. Marco loses track of both of them only briefly when he takes a few moments to attend to another matter. The clock by the gates ticks off the minutes later and later, the ornaments upon it twirling and shifting. October slips into November, a change that goes largely unnoticed other than by those standing closest to the clock. The crowd grows thinner. Masks are returned to the baskets in the courtyards and by the gates, jumbled piles of empty eyes and ribbons. Children are dragged away with promises that they may return the next evening, though the circus will not be there the next evening, and later those children will feel slighted and betrayed. In a passage near the back of the circus, which is somewhat wide and filled with only a handful of patrons, Mr. A.H. stops. Chandresh watches him from a short distance away, unable to see clearly why he has halted, though he might be conversing with someone. Through his mask, Chandresh sees only the still grey suit, the hovering top hat. He sees an open target with nothing standing in between. He hears the echo of a voice assuring him that the man is not real, a figment of his imagination, nothing but a dream. Then there is a pause. For just a moment, time slows like something falling while fighting with gravity. The chill breeze that has circled through the open paths of the circus stops. In that moment, nothing flutters, not the fabric of the tents or the ribbon ties of dozens of masks. In the tallest tent, one of the acrobats loses her perfect balance, falling some distance before one of her fellow performers catches her, only narrowly avoiding crashing to the ground. In the courtyard, the bonfire sputters and sparks in a sudden cloud of black smoke, causing those patrons closest to it to jump back, coughing. The kitten that leaps through the air from Poppet's hands to her brother's suddenly twists in the air, landing on its back rather than its feet and rolling towards Widget with an indignant howl. The illusionist pauses, her seamless performance halted as she stands frozen, her face suddenly deathly pale. She sways as though she might faint, and several attentive audience members move to assist her, but she does not fall. Marco crumples as though punched in the stomach by an invisible assailant. A passing patron catches his arm to steady him. And Chandresh Christophe Lefebvre pulls the heavy silver knife from his coat pocket and throws it without hesitation. The knife flies from Chandresh's hand, blade over handle, spinning in perfect revolutions through the air. Its aim is precise and steady, as true as such things can be. Then its target moves. The tailored grey wool that makes up the back of Mr. A.H.'s suit shifts. He moves ever so slightly to the side. It is a graceful step, an unconscious gesture, a movement of weight in space. And so the knife brushes by his sleeve and comes to rest instead in the chest of the man he is speaking with. The blade sliding through his unbuttoned black coat easily, hitting his heart as though it had always been its intended target, the silver handle jutting out just beneath his crimson scarf. Mr. A.H. catches Herr Friedrich Thyssen as he slumps forward. Chandresh stares at his empty hand as though he cannot recall what he was holding moments before. He staggers off, wandering back in the direction of the bonfire courtyard. He forgets to remove his mask when he leaves, and when he finds it discarded in his townhouse the next day, he cannot remember where it came from. Mr. A.H. lowers Herr Thyssen to the ground, speaking a constant string of words over him in tones too low for anyone to overhear. The scattered patrons around them notice nothing at first, though some are distracted by the fact that the two young performers a few feet away have suddenly ceased their show, the boy in the black suit gathering up the visibly agitated kittens. After a long moment, Mr. A.H. stops speaking and passes a grey-gloved hand over Herr Friedrich Thyssen's face, gently closing his surprised eyes. The silence that follows is shattered by Poppet Murray's screaming as the pool of blood on the ground spreads beneath her white boots. Before the shock turns to chaos, Mr. A.H. gently removes the silver-handled knife from Herr Thyssen's chest, and then he stands and walks away. As he passes by a baffled, still unsteady Marco, he hands him the blood-covered knife without so much as a word or a glance before disappearing into the crowd. The handful of patrons who witnessed the event are ushered quickly away. Later, they assume it was a clever stunt, a touch of theatricality for the already festive evening. The Pool of Tears. The sign outside this tent is accompanied by a small box full of smooth black stones. The text instructs you to take one with you as you enter. Inside, the tent is dark, the ceiling covered with open black umbrellas, the curving handles hanging down like icicles. In the centre of the room, there is a pool enclosed within a black stone wall that is surrounded by white gravel. The air carries the salty tinge of the ocean. You walk over to the edge to look inside. The gravel crunches beneath your feet. It is shallow, but it is glowing. A shimmering, shifting light cascades up through the surface of the water. A soft radiance, enough to illuminate the pool and the stones that sit at the bottom. Hundreds of stones, each identical to the one you hold in your hand. The light beneath filters through the spaces between the stones. Reflections ripple around the room, making it appear as though the entire tent is underwater. You sit on the wall, turning your black stone over and over in your fingers. The stillness of the tent becomes a quiet melancholy. Memories begin to creep forward from hidden corners of your mind. Passing disappointments, lost chances and lost causes. heartbreaks and pain and desolate, horrible loneliness. Sorrows you thought long forgotten mingle with still fresh wounds. The stone feels heavier in your hand. When you drop it in the pool to join the rest of the stones, you feel lighter, as though you have released something more than a smooth, polished piece of rock. Another? Farewell. Concord, Massachusetts, October 30th and 31st, 1902. Bailey climbs the oak tree to retrieve his hidden box before sunset, gazing down at the circus that sits bathed in deep orange light, casting long pointed shadows across the field. But when he opens it, he does not find anything he truly wishes to take with him. He removes only Poppet's white glove, placing it in his coat pocket, and returns the box to the tree. At home, he counts out his life savings, which is a higher amount than he had expected, and packs a change of clothes and an extra sweater. He considers packing a spare pair of shoes, but decides he can likely borrow some from Widget if need be. He shoves everything into a worn leather satchel and waits for his parents and Caroline to go to bed. While he waits, he unpacks his bag and then packs it again, second-guessing his choices of what to bring and what to leave behind. He waits an hour after he is certain everyone is asleep, and then another hour for good measure. Though he has become rather proficient at slipping in at abnormal hours, sneaking out is a different matter. When he finally creeps down the hallway, he is surprised how late it is. His hand is on the door, ready to leave, when he turns round, putting his bag down and quietly searching for a piece of paper. Once he locates one, he sits down at the table in the kitchen to write a note to his parents. He explains as best he can his reasons for going and hopes they will understand. He does not mention Harvard or anything about the future of the farm. He remembers when he was very small, his mother once said she wished happiness and adventure for him. If this does not count as adventure, he is not sure what does. "What are you doing?" a voice behind him asks. Bailey turns to find Caroline standing in the doorway in her nightgown, her hair piled on her head in a spiky mess of pin curls and a knitted blanket pulled around her shoulders. "Nothing you need concern yourself with," he says, turning back to his writing. He signs the letter and folds it, leaving it propped upright in the centre of the table, next to a wooden bowl full of apples. "Make sure they read that." "Are you running away?" Caroline asks, glancing at his bag. "Something like that." "You can't possibly be serious," she says with a yawn. "I'm not sure when I'll be back. I'll write when I can. Tell them not to worry about me." "Bailey, go back to bed." "Why don't you go back to bed, Caroline? You look like you could use some more beauty rest." In response, Caroline only twists her face up in a sneer. "Besides," Bailey continues, "when have you ever cared what I do?" "You have been acting like a baby all week," Caroline says, raising her voice but keeping it a hissing whisper. "Playing at that stupid circus, staying out all night. Grow up, Bailey." "That is precisely what I'm doing," Bailey says. "I don't care if you don't understand that. Staying here won't make me happy. It will make you happy because you are insipid and boring, and because an insipid, boring life is enough for you. It's not enough for me. It will never be enough for me. So I'm leaving. Do me a favour and marry someone who will take decent care of the sheep." He takes an apple from the bowl and tosses it in the air, catching it and tucking it in his bag before he bids Caroline goodbye with a cheerful wave and nothing more. He leaves her standing by the table, with her mouth opening and closing in silent rage as he closes the door quietly behind him. Bailey walks away from the house buzzing with energy. He almost expects Caroline to come after him or to immediately wake their parents and alert them to his departure. But with each step he takes away from the house, it becomes more clear that he is truly leaving, with nothing left to stop him. The walk feels longer in the stillness of the night, no crowds of people heading to the circus along his route as there have been every other evening, when he raced to arrive before the opening of the gates. The stars are still out when Bailey reaches his oak tree, his bag slung over his shoulder. He is later than he'd wanted to be, though dawn is some time away. But beneath the starry sky, the field that stretches out below his tree is empty, as though nothing has ever occupied the space but grass and leaves and fog. How are we doing? One more? One more?
You have to keep going. You can't stop there.
Keep going. Retrospect. London, November 1st, 1901. The man in the grey suit slips easily through the crowd of circus patrons. They step out of the way without even considering the movement, parting like water as he heads towards the gates. The figure that blocks his path near the edge of the courtyard is transparent, appearing like a mirage in the glow of the bonfire and the gently swaying paper lanterns. The man in the grey suit halts, though he could easily continue on through his colleague's apparition unimpeded. "Interesting evening, isn't it?" Hector asks him, drawing curious stares from the nearby patrons. The man in the grey suit subtly moves the fingers of one gloved hand, as though turning the page of a book, and the staring ceases, curious eyes becoming unfocused, their attention drawn to other sights. The crowd continues by, moving on to and fro the gates without noticing either gentleman. "It's not worth the bother," Hector scoffs. "Half these people expect to see a ghost around every corner." "This has gotten out of hand," the man in the grey suit says. "This venue was always too exposed." "That's what makes it fun," Hector says, waving an arm over the crowd. His hand passes through a woman's shoulder, and she turns, surprised, but continues walking when she sees nothing. "Did you not use enough of your concealment techniques, even after ingratiating yourself with Chandresh to control the venue?" "I control nothing," the man in the grey suit says. "I established a protocol of secrecy disguised as an air of mystery. My counsel is the reason this venue moves from location to location unannounced. It benefits both players. It keeps them apart. If you'd put them together properly from the beginning, she would have broken him years ago. Has your current state made you blind? You're a fool to trap yourself like that, and you are a fool if you cannot see that they are each besotted with the other. If they had not been kept apart, it simply would have happened sooner." "You should have been a damned matchmaker," Hector says, his narrowed eyes vanishing and reappearing in the undulating light. "I have trained my player better than that." "And yet she came to me. She invited me here personally as you—" He stops, a figure in the crowd catching his eye. "I thought I told you to choose a player you could tolerate losing," Hector says, watching the way his companion gazes after the distressed young man in the bowler hat who passes by without noticing either of them, pursuing Chandresh through the throng of patrons. "You always grow too attached to your students. Unfortunate how few of them ever realise that." "And how many of your own students have chosen to end the game themselves?" the man in the grey suit asks, turning back. 7? Is your daughter to be the 8th? "That is not going to happen again," Hector responds, each word sharp and heavy despite his insubstantial form. "If she wins, she will hate you for it, if she does not already." "She will win. Do not try to avoid the fact that she is a stronger player than yours and always has been. The man in the grey suit lifts a hand in the direction of the bonfire, amplifying the sound that echoes from beyond the courtyard so that Hector can hear his daughter, repeating Friedrich's name over and over in increasing panic. Does that sound like strength to you? He asks, dropping his hand and letting Celia's voice blend into the din of the crowd. Hector only scowls, the flames of the bonfire further distorting his expression. An innocent man died here tonight, the man in the grey suit continues. A man your player was quite fond of. If she had not already begun to break, this will do it. Was that what you meant to accomplish here? Have you learned nothing after so many competitions? There is never any way to predict what will come to pass. No guarantees on either side. This isn't over yet, Hector says, vanishing in a blur of light and shadow. The man in the grey suit walks on as though he had not paused, making his way through the curtains of velvet that separate the courtyard from the world outside. He watches the clock by the gates for some time before he departs the circus. How are we doing for time?
More.
Total time for more.
10 to 10. 10 to the 10 to the 10 to 10.
Loads of time.
There's
a happy one.
There's one more chapter in part 2 of this book.
Yeah.
Well,
is it happy?
I mean, it's certainly happier.
Great.
Do it.
It's got some sexy bits in, which I know you like.
Oh, do they touch hands again? Do they touch hands again?
Do the chandeliers shake?
Guess you'll find out.
Okay.
Beautiful Pain, London, November 1st, 1901. Marco's flat was once plain and spare, but now it is crowded with an assortment of mismatched furniture. Pieces that Chandresh became bored with at one point or another and were adopted into this purgatory instead of being discarded entirely. There are too many books and not enough shelves to hold them, so they sit piled on antique Chinese chairs and sari-wrapped cushions. The clock on the mantel is a Herr Thiessen creation, adorned with tiny books flipping through their pages as the seconds tick towards 3 o'clock in the morning. The larger books on the desk are moving at a less steady pace as Marco goes back and forth between handwritten volumes, scrawling notes and calculations on loose sheets of paper. Over and over he crosses out symbols and numbers, discards books in favour of others, and then returns to the discarded ones again. The door of the flat opens of its own volition, locks falling open and hinges swinging wildly. Marco jumps from his desk, spilling a bottle of ink across his papers. Celia stands in the doorway, stray curls escaping her upswept hair. Her cream-coloured coat hangs unbuttoned, too light for the weather. Only when she moves into the room, the door closing automatically and locking with a series of clicks behind her, does Marco notice that beneath her coat, her gown is covered with blood. What happened? He asks, the hand that had been moving to write the bottle of ink halting in midair. You know perfectly well what happened, Celia says. Her voice is calm, but already the ripples are beginning to form in the dark surface of the ink pooled on the desk. Are you all right? Marco asks, trying to move closer to her. I most certainly am not all right, Celia says, and the bottle of ink shatters, raining ink all over the papers and splattering Marco's white shirt sleeves, falling into invisibility on his black vest. His hands are covered in ink, but he is still distracted by the blood on her gown, scarlet streaming across the ivory satin and vanishing behind the black velvet fretwork that covers it like a cage. Celia, What did you do? He asks. I tried, Celia says. Her voice breaks on the word so that she has to repeat herself. I tried. I thought I might be able to fix it. I've known him so long that maybe it would be like setting a clock to make it tick again. I knew exactly what was wrong, but I couldn't make it right. He was so familiar, but it didn't work. The sob that has been building in her chest escapes. Tears that she has been holding back for hours fall from her eyes. Marco rushes across the room to reach her, pulling her close and holding her while she cries. I'm sorry, he says, repeating it in a litany over her sobs until she calms, the tension easing in her shoulders as she relaxes into his arms. He was my friend, she says quietly. I know, Marco says, wiping away her tears and leaving smudges of ink across her cheeks. I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. Something threw off the balance and I cannot figure out what it was. It was Isabel, Celia says. What? The charm Isabel put over the circus, over you and me. I knew about it. I could feel it. I didn't think it was doing much of anything, but apparently it was. I don't know why she chose tonight to stop. Marco sighs. She chose tonight because I finally told her that I love you, he says. I should have done it years ago, but I told her tonight instead. I thought she took it well, but clearly I was wrong. I haven't the slightest idea what Alexander was doing there. He was there because I invited him, Celia says. Why would you do that? Marco asks. I wanted a verdict, she says, tears springing to her eyes again. I wanted this to be over so I could be with you. I thought if he came to the circus that a winner could be determined. I don't know how else they expect it to be settled. How did Chandrash know he would be there? I don't know. I don't even know what possessed him to go there, and he insisted that I not accompany him, so I followed him instead to keep an eye on him. I only lost track of him for minutes when I went to speak with Isabel, and by the time I caught up with him again. Did you feel as though you had the ground removed from beneath you as well? Celia asks. Marco nods. I was trying to protect Chandrash from himself, he says. I had not even considered he might be a danger to anyone else. What is all this? Celia asks, turning her attention to the books on the desk. They contain endless pages of glyphs and symbols, ringed in text ripped from other sources, affixed to one another and inscribed over and over. In the middle of the desk, there is a large leather volume. Pasted inside the front cover, surrounded by an elaborately inscribed tree, Celia can barely make out something that must once have been a newspaper clipping. The only word she can discern is transcendent. This is how I work, Marco says. That particular volume is the one which binds everyone in the circus. It's the safeguard, for lack of a better term. I placed a copy of it in the bonfire before the lighting, but I've made adjustments to this one. Celia turns through the pages of names. She pauses at a page that holds a scrap of paper bearing the looping signature of Lainey Burgess, next to a space where an equal-sized piece has been removed, leaving only a bright blank void. I should have put Herr Thiessen in there, Marco says. I never even thought of it. If it had not been him, it would have been another patron. There is no way to protect everyone. It's impossible. I am sorry, he says again. I did not know Herr Thiessen as well as you, but I did admire him and his work. He showed me the circus in a way I had not been able to see it before, Celia says. How it looked from the outside. We wrote letters to each other for years. I would have written you myself if I could put down in words everything I want to say to you. A sea of ink would not be enough. But you built me dreams instead, Celia says, looking up at him. And I built you tents you hardly ever see. I have had so much of you around me always, and I have been unable to give you anything in return that you can keep. I still have your shawl, Marco says. She smiles softly while she closes the book. Beside it, the spilled ink seeps back into its jar, the glass fragments reforming around it. I think this is what my father would call working from the outside in rather than the inside out, she says. He was always cautioning against it. Then he would despise the other room, Marco says. What room? Celia asks. The bottle of ink settles as though it had never been broken. Marco beckons her forward, leading her to the adjoining room. He opens the door but does not step through it, and when Celia follows him, she can see why. It may once have been a study or a parlour, not a large room, but perhaps it could be referred to as cosy were it not for the layers of paper and string that hang from every available surface. Strings hang from the chandelier and loop over to the top of the shelves. They tie back upon each other like a web cascading from the ceiling. On every surface, tables and desks and armchairs, there are meticulously constructed models of tents. Some made from newsprint, others from fabric. Bits of blueprints and novels and stationery, folded and cut and shaped into a flock of striped tents, all tied together with more string in black and white and red. They are bound to bits of clockwork, pieces of mirror, stumps of dripping candles. In the centre of the room, on a round wooden table that is painted black but inlaid with light stripes of mother of pearl, there is a small iron cauldron. Inside it a fire burns merrily, the flames bright and white, casting long shadows across the space. Celia takes a step into the room, ducking to avoid the strings that hang from the ceiling. The sensation is identical to entering the circus, even down to the scent of caramel lingering in the air. But there is something deeper beneath it, something heavy and ancient underlying the paper and string. Marco stays in the doorway as Celia navigates carefully around the room, mindful of the sweep of her gown as she peers into the tiny tents and runs her fingers delicately over the bits of string and clockwork. This is very old magic, isn't it? She asks. It's the only kind I know, Marco responds. He tugs a string by the doorway, and the movement reverberates throughout the room, the entire model circus sparkling as bits of metal catch the firelight. Though I doubt it was ever meant for this purpose. Celia pauses at a tent containing a tree branch covered in candle wax. Orienting herself from there, she locates another, gently pushing open the paper door to find a ring of tiny chairs representing her own performance space. The pages that comprise it are printed with Shakespearean sonnets. Celia lets the paper door swing closed. She finishes her tentative tour around the room and rejoins Marco in the doorway, pulling the door softly closed behind her. The sensation of being within the circus fades as soon as she has crossed the threshold, and she is suddenly acutely aware of everything in the adjoining room. The warmth of the fire fighting against the draft from the windows, the scent of Marco's skin beneath the ink and his cologne. Thank you for showing me that, she says. I take it your father would not approve, Marco asks. I don't particularly care what my father approves of any longer. Celia wanders past the desk and stops in front of the fireplace, watching the miniature pages turning through time on the clock upon the mantel. Next to the clock there sits a solitary playing card, the 2 of hearts. It bears no sign that it was once pierced with an Ottoman dagger. No evidence that Celia's blood has ever marred its surface, but she knows that it is the same card. I could speak with Alexander, Marco suggests. Perhaps he saw enough to provide a verdict, or this will result in some sort of disqualification. I'm certain he thinks me a disappointment at this point. He could declare you the win. Stop, Celia says without turning. Please, stop talking. I don't want to talk about this damned game. Marco attempts to protest, but his voice catches in his throat. He struggles against it, but finds he is unable to speak. His shoulders fall in a silent sigh. I am tired of trying to hold things together that cannot be held, Celia says when he approaches her. Tired of controlling what cannot be controlled. I am tired of denying myself what I want for fear of breaking things I cannot fix. They will break no matter what we do. She leans against his chest and he wraps his arms around her, gently stroking the back of her neck with an ink-stained hand. They stay like this for some time, alongside the crackling of the fire and the ticking of the clock. When she lifts her head, he keeps his eyes locked on hers as he slides her coat from her shoulders, resting his hands on her bare arms. The familiar passion that always accompanies the touch of his skin against hers washes over Celia, and she can no longer resist it, no longer wants to. Marco, she says, her fingers fumbling with the buttons on his vest. Marco, His lips are on hers, hot and demanding, before she can finish. While she undoes button after button, he pulls blindly at fastenings and ribbons, refusing to take his lips from hers. The meticulously constructed gown collapses into a puddle around her feet. Wrapping the unbound laces of her corset around his wrists, Marco pulls her down to the floor with him. They continue to remove layer after layer until nothing separates them. Trapped in silence, Marco traces apologies and adoration across Celia's body with his tongue, mutely expressing all the things he cannot speak aloud. He finds other ways to tell her, his fingers leaving faint trails of ink in their wake. He savors every sound he elicits from her. The entire room trembles as they come together. And though there are a great many fragile objects contained within it, nothing breaks. Above them, the clock continues to turn its pages, pushing stories too minuscule to read ever onward. Marco does not remember falling asleep. One moment Celia is curled in his arms, her head resting against his chest as she listens to his heart beating, and the next he is alone. The fire has died down to smouldering embers. The grey dawn creeps in through the windows, casting soft shadows. Upon the two of hearts on the mantel, there sits a silver band engraved in Latin. Marco smiles, slipping Celia's ring onto his pinky, alongside the scar on his ring finger. He does not notice until later that the leather-bound safeguard that had been on his desk is gone.
What's gone from his table or from his desk? What's gone from his desk?
The book.
The safeguard.
The magic book.
The one that has everyone's names in it, and the
okay.
sort of like "You're Not Gonna Die" book.
Okay.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Oh,
How are you all
man.
doing?
Also,
A
steamy
passionate
magic sex.
ending. Yes.
Love
Almost
it.
slightly underwhelming, just gonna say, but it
Yeah.
does leave a lot to the imagination.
There was too much hype.
Yeah, it's, I mean, sex is fine, but it's nothing comparing to like the brushing of fingers together.
That is
Very, very Victorian. Very Victorian.
When he pulled her down with like the corset strings, that's sexy. Come on.
I wish I had a corset.
That's fine. We can get you a corset.
I mean, I have worn them before, but only once, twice. But I don't own one. So
They're
there we
not
go.
very comfortable. You don't want to.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I love them.
Really?
I think they're super comfy, yeah.
Maybe you're just more corset shaped than I am.
You're also going to have a really well-fitting one, or they're not comfortable.
I mean, corsets are basically a metal cage saying, you will be the shape.
I don't know, I find them quite comforting. Is that weird?
Like they're holding you tight.
It says a few things about you, Frankie.
We're learning a lot about you.
Exactly.
There we go.
No comment.
Malcolm and I are on the same page.
Like a permanent hug.
Can we just go back to the absolute trauma of Bailey, though, for a second?
Oh my god!
Like, because that's terrible and that's going to get fixed later in the book, right, Frankie?
Is it going to be okay?
That should be okay.
Do you need me to say the thing?
Yeah. Yeah, but we also need it to be true.
Yeah.
Bailey's going to be okay.
I can't see you.
Lies!
Ah.
The book doesn't deliver on that. We just need his